We'll start our normal prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we study together with enthusiasm and vigor. May we be illumined in our study as well. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Benochtei live Gurlaya. Grace of God on you all. So, although the topic of tonight is the fabric of Maya, we, of course, have people live. I assume they're live here. And so some questions have been asked. One question is, from a practical point of view, how do we deal with the pain, if you will, and I'm paraphrasing, of criticism? Because it's a painful thing. The way in which we view the world, of course, is intrinsically conducive to pain, simply because maybe we're not seeing it as it should be seen. Maybe we put ourselves in an isolated bubble, declare our individuality, and other people opposed to us in a different kind of half of a sphere. So that we have some options, all centered around survival. And as I was saying earlier, no matter how much we think that the Earth is a planet that revolves around the sun as part of a family of planets, we still are inclined to take a geocentric and egocentric position. So collectively, our world is the Earth, and up and down is purely from our personal geocentric point of view. But in the same way, we view our life in an egocentric way. Everything revolves around us, so that we are the most important entity. This is not just ourselves. This is any creature that has some kind of level of organic sentiency. So we know that all our biological ancestors, physical ancestors, did have and still have a survival mechanism, sometimes collective, sometimes individual. But the collective side of it is just a way of sustaining the individual. You just want to sustain yourself through group support. And in human life, sometimes we display that as well. All oriented around individual survival, we use other people as support groups, society as support groups, or we try to tackle things individually, in isolation, by withdrawing, or we take a select few people and rely on them. But it's all a selfish strategy. And it's all because we have a sense of embodiment. So our sense of who am I is, I'm primarily physical with physical needs, an urge to physically survive. And plus, much more sophisticated a little bit than that, although you wouldn't think so. Sophisticated in the sense that I don't know of any elephants who gather on a riverbank with flags as an army and invade another herd of elephants. Only man has the great wisdom to do this and destroy people en masse and hurl missiles across, destroying whole cities with the discovery of a very important thing in life. And the lesson that we learned from it is things are not quite what they seem to be. For example, in the Second World War, there was these nuclear bombs were dropped, Nagasaki and so on. And people are still suffering from the effects so many years later. What was it that possessed somebody to do that? In any event, anybody who thought that matter was solid have to revise their opinion. Even though things look solid, we know that things are, beyond the molecular structure, atomic. And the atom isn't solid because you can blast the atom and then you have radiation. And people are suffering from that radiation. Radiation seems to be a unity behind the individuality and spatial separateness of atoms. Atoms can be seen like that, but even atoms are not like that. Because we know that the subatomic parts of atoms are not really things, and they don't do what things do. So that the fundamentals of foundational physics tell us that there is something called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And Heisenberg's uncertainty principle tells us that if you know where something is, you have no idea what it's doing. And if you know what it's doing, you have no idea where it is. And a minimum certainty or a minimum restriction is given. The uncertainty can be infinite, but it can never be less than a certain quantity called Planck's constant. Now, that means that we're dealing with a very vague kind of universe, and we're laboring under the illusion that it is solid, and we're laboring under the illusion that we have an opposition player somewhere that doesn't like me and wants to criticize me. And supposing my personal strategy for survival is that I want everything to be perfect. And since nothing is perfect, there'll always be room for some critical adjustment somewhere in my own life or in others. And so when others criticize me, it becomes a sensitive area. And my whole endeavor in life becomes making adjustments, filling in holes, on the assumption that God is a fool. God is a fool, made a whole universe with holes in. And I have to go and fill them all in. Or maybe God wants to do that himself. And my part is, in my local area, that I'll do it for him. And at the end of your life, wanting a level of freedom and truth, a complaint is made, Lord, you never gave me the opportunity to pursue this reality, this area of wisdom that you espouse in the scriptures, this area of truth, these higher values and so on and so forth. I never had a chance to discover the kingdom of God that is within because I was too busy making adjustments. You made a rocky universe, and I had to go and correct it all the time. And supposing you set up a drama like that, a dialogue with God, no doubt God will say, my dear child, you wanted things to correct. I gave you an abundance of things to correct. So if you're in the correcting business, you won't get peace of mind. And you'll be sensitive, therefore, to any kind of criticism. So is there a better way of evaluating things? Yes. Just as our evaluation of solid material is not accurate, we also have to have this understanding that maybe our whole worldview is inaccurate. Now, this is the whole purport of the Vedanta philosophy. The Vedanta philosophy declares that there is only one entity, and this entity is called Brahman. Only one existence is there. And it is without a second, and it is the nature of existence itself and knowledge and bliss. It's real. That is, it doesn't change. That is, it's not divided in space. It has no change in time. And it has no boundary. That is, it is infinite. When we look at the world, we find it is finite. There are boundaries. Even if you look out to the furthest corners with the latest equipment, there is a constant speed of light which sets a visual limit. If you say this universe is expanding, you're really saying it's finite. What it means is that if the expansion was twice the rate it is then we'd have no way of seeing this rate of expansion. And if it was less, if the rate of expansion was half, then our border would be closer. So there's a finite border that suggests that there must be an infinite. And there is a spatial limitation that suggests to us that this one entity cannot be divided. Then we have to find some explanation. How is it that this world of people and places and events is so real to us? That's a question that will arise. How is it that one can take the material universe and its objects to be real? And how have the unsubstantial names and forms that we witness all around us, in the form of people and places and events, how have they come into existence in the first place? And if the ultimate reality is only one thing, then why do we see the relative world and its multiplicity of beings? So these are puzzling questions, and people have been puzzling these questions from time immemorial. And there are three suggestions. First suggestion is some extra cosmic creator God is creating something like a potter, making a pot out of clay, or something like a carpenter, making something out of wood. Some extra cosmic creator power is doing it and running things for us. And some will believe that that God, or the power itself, has actually become the universe. That's a position that can be taken. And again, others, we call them non-dualists, such as Shankaracharya's grand teacher, Gaudapada, will say the problem doesn't arise at all because there's no creation. The relative world doesn't exist. Not certainly, not when viewed from this unitist point of view. What's the evidence? When we stand in Brahman's area and look at it from his point of view, this world of our experience disappears. It goes, it's gone, it's finished. That's the evidence. You can't have a relative world and an absolute conjointly together. When the one is on the stage, the other one's gone. When the other one is there, the other one is gone. Can't have the two coexisting. And so somebody like Gaudapada will have this, and he'll put it clear in his commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad, that all this idea that things are self-caused within the universe, a chain of cause and effect that never ends, can be very, very nicely refuted. Because the evidence of relationships and the established view that there's no real creation can be established by standing where that unity is, and all the other things have gone. And the manifold universe has no existence because it's not perceived from that point of view when knowledge is attained. Of what use is all of this practically when we come under the firing line or experience pain? Well, the practical thing is the root cause of our pain is because we made a mistake. We saw this universe for something that it wasn't, just as you see solid material and it's actually radiation when you blast it. It looks like that. Our gut responds to our so-called reality. We set up a very carefully strategized formula for our own survival from it, and we operate from that point of view. But at some point it will occur to you, this formula is not working. This egocentric position that I have put close to me is no longer tenable, no longer viable, and that all the wishes that I want, even in a spiritual realm, I want heaven, or I want whatever it is followed closely by a bracketed inference, I haven't got it. There's a +1 and -1, you don't get anywhere. I want it equals I haven't got it. I want peace. Means I'm a turmoil. I want happiness. Are you happy? Yes, seem to be happy. Then why do you want happiness? Well, I want it to last. Ah, that's different. What formula are you using? So the only way that we read the world in a so-called normal sense, in a biological sense, in a human sense, is through the sense organs, and our interpretation is very limited. So how do we revise our understanding? And these three positions, in answer to this question, how you get from being to becoming, as it were, is simply centered around these progressive steps. These are not different positions. We start off with an extra cosmic position. God is there somewhere. And we can call on him when we like. He made this world. It's up to him to fix it. All right. Not a bad position. But as that understanding grows, the realization comes that +1 - 1, I'm not getting anywhere. Whatever I want is bracketed by haven't got. I want, haven't got. And then is this universe something like a deficient, defective universe with holes in that have to be filled? God made a stupid world with full of holes. Then what did he do after his day of rest, his 7 days, and he had a day of rest? He went back to work. What was his job? Filling holes and making new holes for the next generation. What a foolish thing. I could have made a better universe than that. And what is your job? Oh, I'm in the same occupation. And with the Irish Roads Department, what's your job? My job is to dig holes. And then what? Well, next year I'll fill them up again. Or next month I'll fill them up again. What is your job? Making holes and filling them. What is the purpose in life? Nothing. I see. Won't you have a different perspective on it? Don't you think that everything is actually fundamental, full and free and perfect, unblemished? There's nothing to be changed, nothing to be criticized. So when I interpret another entity, seemingly separate from me, who is criticizing me, then what should be my approach? Defending my position doesn't work. Correcting my position or another person's position doesn't work. Some other formula has to be engaged where I look with new eyes at the reality of the situation and say, behind it all is a non-spatial, non-temporal entity, this one existence without a second. And it is beaming perfection. And when I see it beaming perfection, perfection comes through, attitudes change, circumstances change. And all these waves that I see in a manifold way, all this manifested world in the relative sense, are all something like waves. And since there's only one existence, these waves must be manifested from the same entity. And should I take it seriously if there's a play of waves in front of me and a drama presented? And should I not take Shakespeare seriously when he says that all the world's a stage and we are but players? Why don't I take it in that way? And if I do, what effect will it have? Firstly, I'll be much better humored. I'll realize different people playing different parts. But there's only one player in this. That's the difference. In a drama, different players are playing different parts. But can I not see it as one production? Can I see it as a oneness? One entity playing all these parts? Then Gaudapada is seeing it from this point of view in the Mandukya Upanishad, that there is only this one existence, and from that point of view, this relative world doesn't exist. But is that the only way of looking at it? No. Shankaracharya, also a non-dualist, puts it from the relative point of view and says, by the way, this also is real. You can't say that it is unreal, but it has a relative nature. It is only conditionally real. It's only as far as I position myself. And if I see the other person as an entity attacking me and wounding me, and I have to defend myself either by counterattacking or whatever else it is, then I have escaped the depth of what is there. And I've only taken the surface, and I've taken that to be an absolute reality instead of a relative reality. And that's the difficulty. And this whole idea of taking the relative reality as the absolute reality has one term in the Vedanta philosophy, and this is called Maya. Maya is a paradox. Maya is that somehow that misunderstanding, that ignorance that says, I take the relative to be the absolute. That's all. And if I understand that, from a practical point of view, won't my approach be somewhat different? According to Shankara, man cannot ignore the universe as long as he sees it. And he can't deny its relationships with other human beings, whether they're kind, whether they're critical, whether I get on with them, whether I don't. We have to play the game as if it were real. And surely they are real to that person if he is conscious of the reality of his own individuality, his own individual ego, his egocentric, geocentric position. And so as long as a person sees this multiplicity around, sees individuals as other individuals in counterpoise to themselves, then that person must work, they must pray, they must worship, they must reap the results of their own deeds, good or bad. And all the things that we experience as an effect are all to do with different aspects of these activities. How we steer and gear up the mind. And so we have to take on board, we have to embrace, even if we have this theoretical distinction, we also have to take on the distinction of morality and immorality. And so we have to understand there's a structure to this Maya. And when we say ajnana, that is ignorance, when we say avidya, that is also ignorance, lack of knowledge, when we say nature, prakriti, universe, material existence, we are really saying the same thing, that this is Maya, where it looks like something, but it's in actuality something else. It is taken for something else. It is a mistake. Now, how can the absolute have become or have produced the relative? You may ask. How can this internal self, which is one with it, which is nothing but Brahman, identify itself with the perishable body and the ego and the senses and all of these kinds of things? And the answer is, we don't know. Have no idea. The position is one of a kind of knowledgeable agnosticism about it. That is to say, we can see the logical impossibility of determining the precise relationship between the absolute and the relative. But all we know is when we stand in the absolute, all the other stuff is gone. That's the fact of it. But we know the mechanism of it. Now we know the mechanism of the universe is one of transformational causation, that is, one of cause and effect, and one is the cause of the other, like waves in an ocean, that the peak of a wave in the ocean is caused by its depression, its dip, and the dip is caused by another peak, and the peak and the dip, and so on, it goes on. So the cause and the effect are really the same thing. But what is ignored is at the very depth is an ocean. And it is the ocean that is the cause of the wave, and the wave is not the cause of the ocean. The wave can think of itself as an isolated system in combat with another wave that happens to either buttress against me or cooperate with me. Another wave, another human, or another event, or another scene. Many different waves will come. So I have to get to the depth of the ocean to calm it all out and understand that this Maya is comprised of a kind of fabric. We can think of it as a fabric, a fabricated thing that is derived from a certain level of image making, imagination. Now, these three strands, it has been discovered, are like ropes. And these are not qualities, actually. They're more than qualities. Supposing you say that, or I ask you, please go and fetch me a cup of whiteness. It won't make any sense to you. A quality has got to go with something substantial. You might say to me, okay, but what is it? Is it white milk? Is it white paint? What is it? I have to tell you. And so these are actual substantial things in the relative existence displayed for us to make a mistake. And these primary two things, anyway, are there, which enable us to have the illusion of a reality. And there are a number of examples. When we talk about an illusion, a good example that most of us have will be that there is a mirage somewhere in the desert. And then many people have seen illusions presented. There is a famous international group of people who go around the world and they call themselves the illusionists. And you'll be astonished at what they do. But they can tell you up front, look, you may think we have supernatural powers, but actually it's all an illusion. And one of the secrets of the magic show, the illusion, is diverting your attention away from what is doing on the other side, showing something with your right hand while the left hand is doing something else. So this capacity to steer your attention away from the fundamental truth of what is happening is part of obscuring the reality. And this hiding component, we technically call this tamas. Literally meaning darkness. Something is hidden from us. Something is happening and we don't know about it, but it's happening nonetheless. And it is there with every single component of the universe. And in physics is the reason why things stubbornly don't want to go until they are forced to go. And this is part of Newton's fundamental law. And he puts it out in the beautiful Latin phrase. So things don't want to move. We have to apply a force to make it move. Now, if you ask any scientist throughout the world, why is there this principle of inertia that Newton takes for granted, they won't be able to say. They don't realize there's a fundamental component and there's a reason for it. What is that reason? Well, the reason is this, that inertia, when you add components that are essentially called space, time, and causation, when you add these three components intrinsic to this relative world, then naturally the changeless will present itself as inertia. Because we're not talking of an entity that has any time or change in it. And the only thing where we register change is if there's a time component to it. When you take the time component away, the change is gone. So this is nature's way of making sure that we know or that we assume that things are happening in a certain time framework and they're not. And it is to our advantage from this point of view. It gives us an opportunity to insert something independently of our own. And that independent and useful insertion comes under the label of sattva. All the noble qualities. When I mentioned that, we should not abandon the discernment between morality and immorality. We present the moral position in its highest phase. And the characteristic of that will be complete selflessness. abandoning this position of this physical identification of ego, when we abandon that, then we find things look different. We have to see things in a much different light, in a purer light. We have to revalue things and revalue our reactions. So burying your head in the sand will be a darkness reaction, an action that doesn't help. It will be one that compounds our ignorance, but is also a self-preservation technique. Every ostrich will be using it, thinking that nobody can see them because their head is buried in the sand. And when a child puts their hands in front of their eyes, everyone disappears. But it's an illusion. The people are still there, and the child discovers as they grow older, oh, I see, this game of peekaboo, we can grow out of that phase because we get an understanding whether the hands are in front or away, the person is still there in front. And then this endeavor for things to fly off, for things to happen, for our own self-survival, this is a quality that is called rajas. And don't think that is only on the psychological level, the human level, or the behavioral level. It is found in every component of nature itself, with the objective of hiding, but also the objective of projecting something that is not there. Now we have an example for that. Many examples. Favorite example is, in the twilight of the day, I look out and I see an object, and it looks to me that it is a snake and therefore dangerous. And I have a number of options. I can aggressively try to kill it, deal with it in this way, crash through the door. Or I can run away, be pure gold. Pure gold means yellow to the core, and run away. Or I can stand yielding, completely mesmerized, and be indecisive about doing anything, just paralyzed with fear. But you see, it was only a projection of a snake on a rope. And the rope is the fundamental, substantial thing that is always there. This example is given. But it is the poor light of the day, that is the darkness of our ignorance. And what happened? The rope was hidden from us. That's why we couldn't see it. That component had to be there. And a snake was projected. And the snake wasn't there. Now, if I see the snake, I have to see the rope, because I mistook it for a snake. I didn't mistake it for a submarine. So the very thing that is there must come through in the appearance of the snake. And when I reveal it through the refining movement of the mind, using every temporal opportunity as a blank opportunity to put something new and vibrant in, that has no component of selfishness, that is of the highest moral values, the highest qualities of purity and truth and goodness and love and harmony, putting that in. Doing it with, how often should I do it? In sufficient amounts so that my natural disposition is that. Not to be caught up with the projection and not to be caught up with the hiding. And then that becomes a revealing factor by itself, neutralizing the other two. That's the technique. That is why we should be moral. And there are so many people misunderstanding this non-dualistic position that says, well, if everything is only one, why should I do anything? It's because you said it with your mouth and your brain ticked over a little bit and you regurgitated something that somebody told you, but you don't believe it. You always thought you were an embodied entity that has to make this arrangement with somebody else and try and defend yourself or deal with some other situation. And it's not correct. So as long as you feel that, again, we have to do all the things. Work, pray. We have to engage in moral behavior, high moral behavior. In other words, we have to be good people, good citizens, And our mind should be so refined that the truth is self-evident for itself. That is the way. So Maya has two components broadly. The component of obscuring things through this dual operation of projecting and hiding, but then revealing because we see the clue. We didn't mistake the rope for something else. We mistook it for something that has the characteristics of it. Now, what are those characteristics that we see? So earlier we did a guided meditation, and people were encouraged to select a scene of their own, and the scene could have been anything. Let's say mountains in the background, sea in the foreground, a blue sky. Let's say that, just broadly, some scene such as that. Then if you can replay that, of course, at any moment in time. That's the advantage of it. And imagine it in glorious technicolor. So it is by this image making that we then recreate the feeling of that. And if we leave it, if we don't do that constantly, and if we don't encourage and engage in the feeling of upliftment that we had, the chances are that other things will automatically occupy our mind. If you leave a house vacant for 3 months, believe you me, there will be occupants. Spiders and bugs will come, and cockroaches will come. Anything will come. So we can't leave the mind in that condition. We have to take measures. And it is these components of time and space that are useful to us. In a spatial area is an opportunity. A time area is a perceived unit where something new can be put in. And since there is only one without a second, and the only thing that we see in the relational world is a play of waves, we can take it in a playful way, a sporting way. In other words, there is such a thing as spiritual rugby. And we have to do it. We have to play that game. And rugby is a useless game if there's no opposition player. Rugby is a useless game if there's no goal. Rugby is a useless game if somebody doesn't tackle you. So our expectation in life should be, there will be obstacles. The fun in life is to acknowledge it from the start and find a way around it, find a formula around it. Not to charge into it, not to run away from it, but to find a way around it. An indirect way of tackling these difficulties. That would be useful to us. So Vedantas use all kinds of terms, avidya, ajnana, prakriti. These are all synonymous with this term, Maya. And Maya is just a statement of fact, that it is as it is. It's a paradox. Things are not finite, but they look to be infinite. Things are mortal, but we assume them to be immortal. Things are changing, but we assume them to be fixed. Things are moving, things are appearing, things are disappearing, but we take them to be a continuum that has a component of reality because the reality sits behind. We take it to be real because when we see, in the example of the snake, we also see the rope. We see the similarities. That is why we see this world as real, because it comes through in our perception. And the universe has a wonderful way of dealing with it, because it stops this non-separate entity, this oneness that has no spatial dimension, no dimension at all, and appears to be in space. And the thing that prevents this, our perceiving this unity, is that it's spaced out. All the world is expanding and spacing itself out to resist it and engaging in a tremendous force. And that force is gravity. And the harder it's spaced out, the more the gravity has to counter it. And electrical energy wants to keep everything small. wants to keep everything limited and finite. Because if we catch the secret of it, we'll see that it is infinite. Gravity wants to bring everything into a unity. Spacing out wants to resist it. And so the play goes on, designed to obscure this fact of it. So this is how nature works. The word Maya was used first in the Rig Veda. And of course, it was there to denote a kind of magical power. And so there's every reason to compare this to a magic show, where something is done with the one hand, obscuring the reality, and something is projected with the other one. But a magician, if he likes you, will reveal the secrets. And we have to, in the context of personal God, we have to ask, please reveal this to me, reveal this secret. Shankara speaks of Maya as the power of the Lord, beginningless, compounded of these three qualities, these three substances that I mentioned. And there's another description of Maya from Sadhananda, another non-dualist, who will say, something positive, though intangible, which cannot be described as either being or non-being. We can't say it doesn't exist. We can't say it does exist. It's inscrutable. And modern science is discovering this inscrutability, puzzling over it, trying to get a theory of everything and not succeeding because it's eluding them. And so making more and more complex, more and more extravagant possible solutions. And we know that the more complex, the less truthful. Or the truth in everything, be it science or anything else, is in its simplicity. If you have only one thing, one fully generalized and unified thing, then you have access to everything. So it can't be described as either being, as either asat or sat, neither being nor non-being. It's indefinable. If it were being in the true sense, then its effect, that is the tangible universe, would be perceived at all times. But you don't. You don't perceive it at all. You don't perceive the subtleties of it. You don't see the things which are beyond your own sense range to start with. And then, of course, on the other hand, being can never become non-being. That's on the other side of the coin. The real can never become unreal. See that prayer? Asato ma satkamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, pratyo amritam gamaya. Lead us from the unreal to the real is the prayer. Realized long ago, and only now come to the surface. So that modern science are looking at this world as an idealization of something. But even the ideas, it goes beyond that. The ideas are just a representation of what are perceived. And as long as one sees this Maya, this mistake, or in its effects, you can say that it belongs to Brahman, because that Brahman is the only thing that exists. Nothing else exists. All right. Now, how do we apply then these three parts when we come across a difficulty? Somebody is painfully criticizing us, criticizing the work we do, the misunderstanding. First of all, we have to expect it as part of the game of life. Secondly, we have to apply the highest values. Love. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Put things in the correct perspective. Does it mean that will be impractical? No. To be impractical will be not to play the game. You use the analogy again of rugby, for example. I'm using the analogy of rugby because a rugby player is here. But not only that, is because rugby is a hard, tough game. And you'll expect some knocks. And it's a peculiar game because everybody knocks everybody else to pieces. People come out bruised, black eyes, maybe even bones broken. And then they all go in a sense of camaraderie to a communal gathering and all congratulate themselves regardless of which side of the team you're on. A kind of ruffian's game for gentlemen. Soccer, on the other hand, by the way, is a gentleman's game for ruffians. I don't know. Maybe you could put it that way. I'll have criticism from both sides. So that's the point. The point is you have to have a formula to deal with it, and it requires practice. That practice is called spiritual practice. We call it sadhana, and all it is starting off. Yeah, to raise the lights, you turn it either up or down, left or right. Yeah, so press it first. That brings it on. Then it rotates. Yeah, so when you rotate, so that's the maximum. That's its maximum. Yeah, that's its maximum.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. So we're adjusting the lights here so you can all see me. I don't know what value there is in that, but there it is. All right. Maya has no existence independence of the gunas. And so we have to use this Maya to combat it. Sri Ramakrishna compared it to, you have to use a thorn to extract a thorn from your foot. That means we don't try to get rid of Maya, we use it, we make use of it. The whole spiritual practice is to use that dimension, which is illuminating the sattva. The Bhagavad Gita gives us a whole chapter on these threefold aspects. We call the yoga of the threefold faith. And everything can be categorized according to these three dimensions. And by illustrating these things, we have some understanding of how these components of Maya exists. And so faith comes into these areas. There's a sattvic version of it, there's a rajasic version of it, and also a tamasic version of it. The faith of each person is in accordance with their natural disposition. If you have a doubting disposition, then that's how you'll approach the world. If you have a disposition of faith and trust, that's how you'll approach the world. And we have to evaluate where our deficit lies, and then encourage the area that requires improvement. That's how we play the game. So it is not necessarily that the difficulty is coming from the other person. The difficulty is coming from the way we handle it, how we will react. So, depending on a person's disposition with regarding to his trust or his faith, so the shraddha is in different modes, either sattvic or rajasic or tamasic. Then according to worship, the sattvic worship is the worship of the divine elements in life, the waves as divine manifested aspects of this one. And the rajasic will be worship which is intrinsically selfish. I want some reward. I want some gain. This is deemed to be worship of yakshas in symbolic language. And then others will worship ghosts and difficult beings like that, the darker side of things. I've come across many people who say, I'm atheist, I don't believe in God. And what do you believe? I believe in angels. Oh, okay, fine. Others say, no, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in angels. What do you believe in? I believe in aliens. Oh, I see, okay, fair enough. Okay. And there are the others who say, no, I don't believe in any of that. I might have a faint idea of God is, but really my interest lies in spirits. In the African religion, it's all to do with ancestor spirit worship, and many cultures are like that also. So ghosts and goblins, even in some of the most sophisticated religions, there are presence of angels and jinn not in the alcoholic sense. Those men who practice violent austerities, not enjoined by the scriptures, there are those as well. People who, for somehow some personal gain in this life or the afterlife will injure their body, flogging it mercilessly, or hanging themselves off on crosses. In the Philippines, you find it. In Mauritius, you'll find all kinds of aberrations there in Hinduism. Every religion will have this element of self-torture. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, know them to be demonic in their resolve. And then also in terms of food. Often people question me about my diet. I'm saying I'm only saying what is there in the Bhagavad Gita. And food that promotes vitality, energy, health, strength, joy, cheerfulness, things which are appetizing, soothing, nourishing, agreeable, these are liked by the sattvic person. It's not saying you can't have them or don't have them. It's saying if you have a sattvic, a pure temperament, then you will enjoy these kinds of foods. But if you want physically, mentally, emotionally, anything else, other kinds of foods will be chosen. And so I often tell people, spiritual life begins with food. Because without a healthy body, you can't do anything. Supposing you decide you'll meditate and you have an arthritic knee, all your meditation will be on your arthritis. It will be nothing to do with spirituality and God. And then food that is excessively bitter or sour, or saline, salty, hot, pungent, dry, burning, these will be liked by the Rajasic people because it will create burning sensation. They'll enjoy it. They worship the god of taste, but not necessarily the god of digestion. It's all right. He's not saying it's right or wrong. He's telling you these people of this temperament will like that kind of food. Isn't it better to be sattvic? Because they are productive of pain, they're productive of grief and disease. Because again, they're worshiping the god of taste, not the god of digestion, that one that sits inside, poor thing, digesting your food. And then that which is badly cooked, or tasteless, or putrid, or stale, unclean, or left over, this food is liked by the tamasic. Those foods which are, in other words, which are fermented. These are liked by the tamasic because they have an effect. The effect will be make you lazy. And if you have a lazy body, you have a lazy mind. It's not saying don't do it, but it's saying that those people of that temperament, and the temperament is not fixed. You can give yourself a promotion. You can go from tamas to rajas to sattva. And so it goes on like that. 3 types of worship are there. Again, 3 types of discipline are there. 3 types of austerity, in other words, are there. 3 types of giving gifts or receiving gifts are there. And so like that, everything is divided into these 3 aspects. And our job is to take stock of all of these things and promote the sattvic element of Maya. In this way, we make use of Maya to transcend Maya. And the qualitative name for that is Trigunatita, one who has transcended these 3 gunas. Rajas and tamas have opposing characteristics. Sattva strikes the balance, that's the idea, between the 2. And the principal trait of rajas is energy. And from that has come the primal flow of activity. And we see it in the universe, in physics, as electrical energy. And we see tamas as inertia. And we see gravity as the capacity to unite everything. That is why in the universe we have these 3 forces. And no scientist will be able to tell you why. What science have done is they've done away, possibly, in their paradigm, with an extra cosmic creator God, but they've become polytheistic and engaged the laws instead. And they haven't questioned, why should there be laws? Why should there be anything? Why should things stop and not want to go? Why should Newton have understood this, but not being able to explain why. And when the electromagnetism is consolidated and the electromagnetic field was discovered and explored, and wonderfully, we see that most of our sensations are within that field, apart from gravity, of course. Gravitational field we always experience. But the electromagnetic field is this way of spacing things out, making things energetic. It is to do with this projection. Inertia is to do with this hiding aspect. So whichever aspect of life, be it psychological, physical, or any other way, will employ these three aspects. So there's a projecting power, there's a veiling power, and there is a revealing power. And in dealing with anything in life, we would have to employ this revealing aspect of it. Let us take the example then of a person who seems to be opposing us in a limited sphere that we have created, making ourselves thoroughly geocentric, thoroughly egocentric. That's our first mistake. Why don't we have a broader perspective? Why don't we stand where Brahman stands and bless from there? And this Brahman is there with guna, with these gunas, and this we call God. And it is not limiting in any way. But when the jiva, the individuality, sense of individuality, is associated with this and labors under this illusion, then, of course, Maya is dominating and is in charge. We can reverse it. But Maya is never in charge in terms of Brahman that has this saguna. That is a reigning, ruling entity that is close to our understanding of personal God. It is Ashwara, it is omniscient, it is omnipresent, it is omnipotent. It is the commander in chief. It is the organizer. And it is the one worthy of worship because it is the highest understanding to the human mind of this absolute when we add the potentiality of space and time. So this is a brief expose then of the fabric of Maya and how we can make it practical. We make it practical by engendering the sattvic qualities. In the example given, a personal example given, when somebody opposes us, criticizes us, what should be our first port of call? We have to revalue not only our own position in this, but the other person's position in this. And we should then see this magnificent oneness in the other person and deal with things on that basis, understanding that it's a play of waves, something like a rugby game, that we can engage it with full enjoyment and vigor and not feel anything personal about it. God dressed up, if you want to put it that way, and dealing with it in this way, we proceed. All right, we leave it at that. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.